Hey, what's up, you guys? Do you want to hear about the time that a speed bump introduced me to my best friend? And no, I am not joking. That is the story for today. So let's get into it. So the year is 1990. Woo! Spin that back, okay? And I am in high school. And like all brilliant high schoolers, I decided that it would be a great day to skip school. Now, this wasn't my idea. This was the idea of my friends. There were 3 of us in this group, and we were like, yeah, we're going to just leave Fort Lauderdale. We are going to leave the confines of our school where there's security and there's safety, and we are going to go gallivanting in the streets of Broward County. So the trick to skipping school back then, for us at least, was that you had to be back by 2:30 in order to ensure that you made the bus, because not getting on the bus, meaning you weren't going to make it back home on time, would be a dead giveaway that you skipped school. So I absolutely wanted to skip school with my 2 friends and the cute guys that were going to be in the car with them. So I did it. Very bad idea. And so we went gallivanting. We went to the swap shop. If you're from South Florida, you know. And we went all of these places, and we ate lunch, and we hung out. I think we swung by the beach because it was right there. All of the things. And then time started ticking. And it was like, okay, let's pile in the car and let's get back to school so that we can make it onto the bus. And so we decided to stop at a strip mall. I don't know if we called them that back then, but there was a strip mall, there were a couple of stores, and we wanted to just run through. So we did that, and then we all piled back into the car, and we start to ride through the parking lot so that we can leave and get back to school on time so we don't get busted. And then we get to a speed bump. And the young man who's driving, who is the owner of the car, he's the only one, we're in his vehicle, and it was spotless, it was waxed, the tires were shiny, the kind of guy that cleans and details his car maybe 2 to 3 times a week. He was obsessed with this Chevy. He gets to the speed bump and he says, I'm not riding over that. Because of course the car was dropped a little bit. And he said, if I ride over that speed bump is going to scrape the underside of my car. Those aren't the words he used, but feel free to watch these with your children. And he said, no, the car's too heavy. And it gets quiet. And then my 2 friends, the guys were sitting in the front and the ladies were sitting in the back. And my 2 friends both look at me. So I'm 5'11", and I was probably 5'10" already by the time I hit 10th or 11th grade. And so they were more petite than I. And I wasn't fat back then, but I was tall, and I was the biggest one. And they both look at me, and then they look past me at each other, and they start giggling, and they kind of did that, you got to get out, so that he could go over the speed bump. Now, it did hurt my feelings because there were 3 strapping boys in the front, but I guess because we were in the back and that would cause it to scrape over the speed bump, this is what I told myself. I was like, okay, fine. And this is when I learned my first lesson. So they lift the seat, they push the seat forward so that I can get out of the back. I'm sitting in the middle. I get out, they get back in the car so that they can go over the speed bump. And as I'm standing outside of the car, I really feel some kind of way. Because if it had been me and I was one of my 2 friends, I would have gotten out with me. I would have said, come on, ladies, well, let's just get out of the back so that the back of the car will come up and he can get over the speed bump without scraping his car, right? But they didn't do that. They let me get out. They were giggling. I could hear it as I get out of the car. And that was my first lesson. That love doesn't abandon you. Because we talk about love on this channel, not romance. Love doesn't really abandon you. Love doesn't make you feel rejected. Love doesn't leave you twisting in the wind. Love will stand with you, like I would have been standing with my friends outside of the car while he went over the speed bump. But then my next lesson came. The car went over the speed bump. He hit the brakes. And so I walked up to the car to get back in, and he hit the gas. And they left. And they left me standing on just the other side of that speed bump in that parking lot, maybe 5 miles from school, 30 minutes before the bus was going to be coming. And they left me there. And that's when I learned another part of my lesson. Signs are there. Red flags, they call them now. No matter how tiny, are always there. I ended up in that car in the first place because I wanted to be friends with them. They were popular, they were attractive, they were cool. And when they invited me, I felt honored. And it never dawned on me that some people, when they talk about keep your enemies close, now they weren't my enemies, but they probably perceived me as an enemy, and I just didn't know it because I was a spelling bee champion, because I had a very high IQ, because I preferred to read, because the music I listened to, some of it was popular, but most of it, they were like, you know, what teenage black girl from Fort Lauderdale listens? What is this stuff you're listening to? What is this that you're reading? And so it was kind of a setup from the beginning. And I don't know what the original plan was, but as I started the very long trek back to school, where I was not going to make it to the bus, I realized that it was always going to be something. I was initially upset about the car. I was initially upset about the speed bump. But in hindsight, it was always going to be something. And at some point, before I ever got in the car, they already decided that I was never going to make it back to that bus on time. And on that 5-mile trek is where I started to meet my best friend. And her name is Erica. That is when I learned a very valuable lesson about what friendship is and what it isn't. And even though I was young and it was hot and I was angry, I was grateful even then. And I said to myself, I will never allow myself to be in this position again. I will never be in a situation where I want someone so much. I want friendship so much that I will allow myself to be put in this situation. When you see the red flags, don't ignore them. The fact that they invited me was a red flag, but I was so desperate in wanting their friendship, I ignored it. And we do that in romantic relationships. People say, oh, I married them and they became a completely different person. They gave you signs and you ignored them because you wanted them, or you invested too much too early. You gave them too much too early. And therefore, you felt like you would be losing out on all that you invested if you didn't continue with the relationship. When they invited me, and I knew that I had never been invited to sit and eat lunch with them. I had never been invited to sit on their special spot on the bleachers after school. When they invited me out that day, common sense should have told me, those are not your real friends. They don't like you like that. When they need help with their homework, when they want someone to do something for them, they might include you a little bit, but they don't love you like that. And my two so-called friends, even though we would be together sometimes because we were in band together and we had some classes together, I knew that their relationship with each other was not like their relationship with me, but I wanted it to be. And so I thought if I got in that car and I hung out and I was cool and I was skipping school, that they'd finally accept me. And that is not what happened. I learned a very hard lesson. I took a very hard fall. I got in some real trouble for missing school that day. But the lesson I learned on that walk, and the Lord has taught me many lessons on a long, hard walk. And I'm going to share another story at another time. But that is when I met my best friend. That is when I realized that I could love me. I could respect me, I could honor me, I could value me. Because I'm going to tell you what I didn't do. When I got back to school the next day and I saw them, I wasn't crying. I had plenty of time to cry. Walking home, I had plenty of time to cry after getting busted for skipping school. I didn't ask them what happened. I didn't ask them, why did you do that? Why did you leave me? Because I already knew why. Because I loved them and they didn't love me. And that is the hard lesson. And sometimes in love, you have to tell yourself the hard truth. Not what you want to hear, but what it really is. And that is how a speed bump introduced me to my best friend. And that was a lesson that I learned 35 years ago this year. And it has never left me. So as weird as it sounds, I thank God for that speed bump. If I knew where it was, I would go and do a little end zone dance and blow kisses at that speed bump. If they haven't paved it over and put a coffee shop there, I would. I thank God for that speed bump, because had the speed bump not happened, I don't know what other plan they may have had for me. And you've seen stories. Always some kid that wants to belong and they get taken away into a situation where it's just them and these other kids, and something tragic happens to them because, as it turns out, that group of people hates that one person and that person doesn't know it. So I thank God it was just a walk. It was just missing a bus. It was just punishment for skipping school. And I thank God for that speed bump. Bump, bump, bump. And that is what I wanted to share about love today. Love doesn't abandon you. It doesn't reject you. It does not harm you. That is not what love is. But if you love yourself, when you see the red flags, you'll keep right on walking. So just remember, you are loved, wanted, and needed, or you would not be here. Amen? So no more love. Show more love. Grow more love. It's lovability, baby. I love that. And I love you too. Amen. Amen.